The person that you are today has way more to do with your childhood than you even realize. And we're going to show you why.
You have a role within your family system, and the only way to have peace within yourself is if you have peace between those roles within your family. And that peace brings out peace to the rest of the world. My question to you is, are you doing that work? Do you know what role you have? And do you know what that role says about you?
Hey everybody, it's Bianca.
Welcome back, Evolvers. It's Emilia. So this episode, what your family system role says about you, is one that is going to probably feel like quite the gut punch for many of us, as why you're getting all smiles right now if you're watching us on YouTube. And the reason why I say that before we get into things is because family roles within a family system is something that if you can go throughout your entire life without directly studying this stuff, it will slap you in the face one way or another, because what your family role is within your family, and we're talking about origin family, that carries with you throughout your life unless you change it. I'm going to include a research study in the show notes that finally we have the brain science to showcase what I've been saying all along, which is your brain goes through multiple different series or has different phases. And we know this now to where at age 32, you're quote unquote that neurologically an adult. But what happens when your brain isn't developing? You've been assigned a role when you were really, really young, and you never end up growing out of that role because you're not developing into a role that you choose for you. What that says about you tells us a lot. And most people just feel trapped within this family role for the rest of their life. So for you, dear listener, we do not want you trapped in a family role. And we want to help you start to understand the implications of what your family system's role is. And by the end of this episode, we're going to have you walk away with knowing what your family role is. So
Before you dive in, super quick.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of you are going to kind of bypass part of what Emilia just said about that research study. I just want to bring context. There's been a lot of research that shows that our brain, quote unquote, stops developing at 25. At the age of 18, you're allowed to join the military and you can buy cigarettes depending on what state you're living in. At 21, you're allowed to vote. You're allowed to drink. No, I mean, not vote. I'm sorry. You're allowed to drink. You're allowed to do all of these things. You're technically considered an adult. And yet the research is saying that cognitively, meaning our brain is not fully developed into an adult until you're 32. That's crazy. How the hell are we supposed to make effective decisions about the entirety of our lives when our brain is not actually fully developed until 32? And even more of what Emilia was just saying, and what we're going to dive into this episode today, is for most people, they never actually get to that full development because of the burdens and the trauma and the shame and the harm and the emotional neglect and the family role that you ended up having, and the consequences of that, and what that did to your brain and your development. Why so many of us feel like we need an adultier adult to guide us? This is why. Have you ever heard someone say that? It's like, I'm an adult, but I need like an adultier adult to like help me make decisions and to tell me what to do. This is why you don't feel like an adult, because of what we're going to be talking about. And 100%. The reason I'm smirking is because when Emilia and I, before we hit record, I said, F this episode, I don't want to record this because of what the work that I've had to do pertaining to this episode, the work Emilia has had to do pertaining to this topic, and now how we're going to help you do the same. So us too.
Yeah, if you have grown up in any family, which by the way, like everyone has a family, whether it's your family of origin and your biological family or a chosen family or whatever, right? Like there's people around you that have helped to develop this role for you. And I want to help to give a little bit of context prior to really launching us forward into how that pertains to our life right now and why we are struggling in the way in which we are struggling. So I want to, as a woman in this field of work, I want to bring in the other women who are responsible for this incredible understanding. So I always knew her growing up and learning and studying psychology and clinical work and social work. Knew her as the mother of family therapy. But who is responsible for bringing this work into the world? And I'm also going to include in the show notes a digital asset that I oftentimes share with individuals and clients that I'm working on. But essentially it's Virginia Satir or Sater, depends on who you're talking to. But essentially her work, she is the one who was the mother, what she's referred to as the mother of family therapy. And essentially, her genius was rooted in a profound love of networks and understanding how when people say that they have struggles, right? What is called now in casework and clinical work as like the presenting issue or the presenting problem, the presenting challenge. So if I were to ask you what's going on in your life and what are you struggling with, whatever you say to fill in that blank, she is the one that is responsible for all of the way in which we now in 2025 come to understand ourselves, how many organizations have integrated what's called change management, organizational management within the systems, businesses, places that we work at, because she realized and she helped us to understand that whatever that presenting problem is, in other words, the story that we tell ourselves, the actual issue, the actual challenge that we're experiencing is deeper than that, right? It's not the presenting problem. And as a matter of fact, when it comes to our family roles and our family systems, the presenting challenge is just the way in which we're trying to cope with a deeper challenge that is way underneath the story that we're telling ourselves. And so she was someone with a love of networks, understanding that no one suffers alone. No one suffers in isolation, and no one has a family role because they assigned it to them. In other words, meaning her work in the evolution of understanding human beings and how interconnected we are. We have presenting problems and challenges and sufferings within our life as a result of what we now know as the dyads and the triads within a family system. And so family systems therapy really caught wind of her work, where at the end of the day, she essentially showcased that, what we're thinking is the issue is not the issue at all. As a matter of fact, the issue pertains way more to the conflict that is happening between family systems and the different roles that a family plays out. And so from her work in the 1950s to now in 2025, her work at understanding how change actually works within a family system and what we do about that, it all has to come down to ultimately the role that we get assigned and how we cope with the issue that created the problem. So I want everyone that's a listener just kind of high level thinking about that. And now let's kind of go into why does that matter and how does that relate to me and my world? So Virginia's work essentially mapped out every single person that is challenged or suffering or burdened. You can trace it all the way back to your family of origin. And that's why there's what Bianca, you had shared at the beginning of this episode. Your family has a lot more to do with what you're experiencing now than most people ever want to name. Because why? We have this inner critic attacking us. Well, our family did the best that they could. We have this displacement of blame. We don't want to not take accountability or responsibility for the hand that we played in this. But that avoids a very important conversation, which is the one about family roles. So we talked about this in group coaching, and we want to bring what we shared at a high level with the group coaching cohort to everyone in this format, because we want you to know by the end of this episode what family role was assigned to you, how that played out in your life, and how you might still be reenacting that role to your detriment.
I want to make a comment about something that you just said before we transition and move on to the context.
Mm-hmm.
There is a validity in the idea that people want to bypass responsibility for changing their lives by blaming other people and just focusing on that blame. Right. And there's a lot of people who are online saying, at what point do you stop blaming your parents for what happened to you? 100%.
Right.
The challenge with that is that most people aren't doing step one, which is what we are talking about, which is appropriately naming, identifying, and acknowledging what actually happened to you. It's a two-step process. Number one is appropriately labeling, identifying, and understanding what happened. How did you get here? Why did this happen to you in the way that it did? So actually naming it and owning what happened. Number two is then you pulling yourself up by the bootstraps, quote unquote, and making the necessary changes that you need to make for you to have a better life. We're not saying go blame your family that they're these horrible people and then expect them to change it. That's the issue. That's why a lot of people are saying you can't always blame everyone else. 100%. That's not what we're saying. What we are saying is understand what happened to you so that you can take the responsibility you as the person need to take to go make the changes to make your life better.
100%. Thank you for saying that. And I want to pull some stats in here. As of recently, I want to say within the last 2 weeks, this was the data. 1.8, and this is pertaining to just Americans. I know we have a global audience, so forgive me. I just want to share these to get us started with. What I remember researching was that at some point or another, approximately 40% of families will seek out family therapy at some point or another in the long term of that family's quote unquote lifetime. Now, Bianca, if you weren't watching this on YouTube, anyone that's listening, Bianca's eyebrows just raised, meaning that she believes that that stat is horseshit. And she and I both agree with that because of the fact that is, now let me ask you this, dear listener, have you ever heard anyone in your social group talk about, oh yeah, we just finished our family therapy session? Like no one talks about it. And that's why it's so quote unquote unfamiliar. But at some point or another, that is what the stats show, according to the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapy. Now,
that's not high enough. It needs to be more. That's what my eyebrows were. It was like, that's it.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, exactly. And so to that term or to that stat, I think that that's really important to recognize, because back to Virginia's work and her work as it pertains to the roles that we're going to find you or help you identify within yourself. The family system is just a microcosm of the bigger systems at play in the world, right? We are, like I said, what we experience, what we think is in isolation is never in isolation, because we are inherently connected to our families, whether you're talking to them right now or not, whether your relationship is good or not. And so her mantra was really, and this was back in 1988, by knowing how to quote unquote heal the family and how to navigate, per this episode, the family roles that prevent healing from happening, we know how to heal the world. And I'm such a proponent of that, because I understand that everything that presents in terms of challenges and suffering ultimately can be tied back down to a dysfunctional pattern within the family. And so many people don't want to actually name that to what you just said. Now, here's the challenge and why I bring that stat in. Okay, Amelia, you're going to unearth this thing about this role that I have in my family. but my family would never go to family therapy. So what the hell do I do with that? I hear you. Trust me. My family's never been to family therapy either. Now, that's not wrong. I'm not blaming them. Would it benefit us? Yes, just like I would believe that it would benefit every single family. However, whether or not that's going to happen is out of your control potentially. So if you're on that end of the spectrum, I see you, I hear you. Now, what do we do with that on the individual level? We, to this episode, understand the role, the family role within our systems that was assigned to us. And again, a lot of this isn't by, your parents saying, okay, we're going to have 3 children, or we're going to have 4 kids, and we're going to assign this kid this role, that kid the other role, and this kid that role. It doesn't happen like that. No parent consciously, from my observation and work that I've done in the field, has ever consciously said, I am going to have my child be the scapegoat, and we are going to name all of the abuse and whatever shit that we want to throw that's happening in our family system at that person, at that child. No one consciously does that. But due to the low conscientiousness when it comes to parenting, the low level of awareness, the low level of ignorance, or the high level of ignorance, and the high level of apathy that inherently results as a overwhelmed parent has, there are roles that help to organize and quote unquote structure family systems. I'm not saying that that was functional, healthy, or adaptive at all. So again, knowing that the family is a microcosm of the bigger systems at play, when we can understand the roles and the roles that we've played, we can now understand how to start to change them, which is where that change model from Virginia's work started to come into play. Okay, so Bianca, I think it's time we get into the actual roles. What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it.
Alrighty then. So on the digital asset, I'm going to actually pull the asset in front of me so that I'm looking at it and kind of describing it. I know you can't see this, Bianca, because we can't share screen, but we're going to have the NLPS production team put a quick flash. Now, this is a drawing that came out that helped to really showcase some of those primary roles. I don't know necessarily who had done this work, so if you know it, please feel free to credit that in the comments. However, what this digital asset showcases is the chief enabler role, which is the protector, quote unquote, of the family system. We'll go deeper into each one. The scapegoat of the family, which is the quote unquote problem child. You have the lost child, which is the one that's kind of forgotten. You have the mascot, the family mascot, which is also known as the family clown. And then you have the family hero, also known as like the golden child or the perfect child, like different roles you might kind of hear interchangeably. This is the caretaker of the family. And then there's the victim child, who's literally and chemically dependent upon the family system. And so there's different characteristics, different traits on each one of these. And we could go out into even more roles, but those are the basic 6 that come into play when it comes to most family systems. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, I don't have 6 members of my family. That's okay. There might be times where you have gone in and out of one role. But if I were to ask you which role resonates most with you, just so far, without even knowing what it presents like on the outside and what it looks like and feels like on the inside, which one resonates with you? And I want you, dear listener, to answer that question. Bianca, do you want to comment on any of that? Any of those roles yet? Okay. All right. So as you'll see in the digital asset, the chief enabler, right? This one is the closest emotionally to the victim and the protector of the family. On the outside, what you'll see presenting this role is externally, you'll see this person being self-righteous, super responsible, passive, physically sick all the time. They might present as a martyr, but on the inside, the core emotions that they're feeling are anger, hurt, guilt, and they have extremely low self-esteem. Now, we all have our families, and we can probably think, okay, who is the one that's enabling all the other dysfunction that's happening? That's the role, okay? Then there's the scapegoat. So this is the quote-unquote problem child. And for anyone not watching on YouTube, I'm doing air quotes. Okay. On the outside, she or he or they might be presenting in the family system as hostile, defiant. They're the rule breaker. They are always getting in trouble or making trouble for the family. And so this person's always, quote unquote, the one that's like inconvenient because they're sounding the alarm on the dysfunctions essentially that are happening within the system, and they're the problem for doing so. But on the inside, what they experience is an intense emotional experience of rejection from the family system. They're deeply hurt by that. They feel a sense of guilt induced by the family dysfunction and the family dysfunctional patterns at play. There might be envy and jealousy presented towards the other siblings or towards the other roles within the family, because at the end of the day, they kind of get all the shit of the family kicked onto them. And they're the ones who experience a deep sense of anger because sometimes they don't have anyone that they can turn to, because everyone else is saying, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, everything's fine in this family. The scapegoat is that quote unquote black sheep, right, of the family. And so a lot of evolvers have resonated in Out of the Mud events. If you're the black sheep, or you've ever felt that way, usually that ties to this role. Evolve listeners, I am so excited to share a win with you. And this win is so close to our hearts at Evolve because whether you listen to an episode at Evolve Ventures or you engage in the community within the ecosystem of Evolve, or if you've engaged in services, paid services at Evolve, you are having a vote in the world. And that vote is for an organization that cares about the future generations. And with that one vote, that connects to a annual impact that we have. And so we raise funds every single year towards the end of the year to our annual fundraiser called Books for Babes. And I want to share that we do that every single year because we are so inspired by our community. And we have a core central value at Evolve of stewardship. So that means taking care of our communities, taking care of the world around us, not just for today, but for tomorrow and for future generations. And so the one way we do that every single year is making sure that we give back. And so we raise funds for Books for Babes to tackle that statistic of 739 million adults being illiterate. And that connects to the children that they have, the access to education, the poverty, the climate injustices that we have. And when we have a book in the hands of individuals who might not have access to education or books, we are single handedly improving the conditions of our world tomorrow. And so I want to give a big shout out to Beth Palmieri. She has been a donor of Books for Babes for the last 5 years. Beth, thank you so much. We haven't even shared publicly the GoFundMe for Books for Babes yet, and you have already donated. And my heart is so full seeing the consistent love, support, and financial contributions towards this incredible effort. So, if you, dear listener, are wanting to, like Beth, get involved with this meaningful cause, you know someone, you want to contribute to this GoFundMe, every single year we have this going on. So, click the link in the show notes. We have that link there for you to donate. And just for all those who have contributed to this cause up until now, I want to give a big gratitude, a heartfelt hug to you, because although I can't share those faces of the children, seeing how excited they get when they have people who care that they don't even know, giving them gifts that are meaningful, that are impactful, that resonate so deeply to help them inspire a world that they can contribute to in a bigger level. It is just the most incredible feeling you can get. So, with that being said, over the last 5 years, we as a community have raised over 5,500 funds. Through that, we have distributed over 2,200 books, and the average annual impact of children, youth, families, and organizations has been over 1,300 souls. And so I want to share that win because I deeply believe in a world where every single day we have an impact, we have a choice, and those choices that we make sincerely impact not just today, but the future. So thank you, Beth. Thank you to the donors of Books for Babes in the last 5 years. Thank you to our partners. Thank you to this beautiful and incredibly generous Evolve community for donating to Books for Babes. Thank you so much. Then there's the lost child. This is that child that feels forgotten, right? Known as the forgotten child. On the outside, they might present as shy or quiet, right? You might see them reading a book or kind of escaping into their own little worlds. In other words, they oftentimes dip into and have a deep interest into fantasy life. So this might present as like video games or fairy tale novels or, books that create this different world that they get to go live in. And they seek out solitary, not confinement, but solitary moments. They seek out solitude, right? They might present as mediocre in life, and they are keen to attach to things and items, not people, because for them, people are not safe. And on the inside, what they actually really feel is rejection, again, from the internal system. They feel a lot of hurt. They feel a lot of things. And one of them most frequent is anxiety, because they never feel safe in that family system. And if they ever were to try to present their true authentic self, it brings a tremendous amount of anxiety because that's way so far out of their comfort zone and what has been allowed to exist in the family system. Then there's the family mascot. This is also referred to as the family clown. This person's always making jokes. And on the outside, what they're presenting as is immature, super fragile. You can't go near a deep conversation with a 10-foot pole. They might come off presenting as like, oh, they're super cute or whatever, right? Like, but at the end of the day, they're hyperactive in their activity levels and they're always distracted. They can never really have one single focus because that really brings up on the inside the three primary emotions that they experience, which is fear, anxiety, and insecurity. Insecurity being the biggest one. And I have so many clients that have fallen into this category where they've had to become the family clown because that's the only value that essentially they have brought to bring levity to the family dysfunction. But deep down, they're extremely insecure. And so it might make you think second on the jokes that are being spewed out at family Thanksgiving and holidays. If there's a jokester deep down inside, you can know what is actually going on. And if that's you, not run away from those emotions. Okay, 2 more roles. The family hero. This is that caretaker of the family at all costs. And so on the outside, they're presenting, this is also like the perfect child, quote unquote, or the golden child. They're the caretaker of the family, maybe not necessarily on the logistical levels, right? Like taking out the trash and all those little things. But as it starts to present into more of the social world, this family hero, the golden child, is a good person. They're a really good kid. And then they become a really good adult. They're a high achiever. They're always striving to do something that will bring pride back to the family to maintain its positive image in the eyes of other people. This person has gotten really good at following rules because that's what helps to reinforce this family narrative about the family, whatever the family motto is. They're presenting like they seek approval. If you were to ask their sibling, they're always seeking mom and dad's approval, right? But at the end of the day, they also are incredibly responsible and way more capable than some of the other siblings. And so their level of capability translates to a narrative of, if I'm capable, that means that I have to be responsible for more. And so it just becomes this cycle that deep down inside, if they were to just be their authentic self, they would be free of the 3 core presenting emotions like guilt, hurt, and inadequacy, right? You're never going to be accepted just as you are. You have to go perform or achieve or do something that brings the family success or pride in order to receive that love. Now, the victim as the last role. This is the chemically dependent, what will be seen on this digital asset. Quite literally, their biochemistry is wired to be dependent upon the family. Why? Because that gives the caregivers this reinforcing dysfunction, that it gives the parents this feeling of need. And so by this victim playing out their patterning on the outside, maybe they might present as hostile. They might be, quote unquote, manipulative to other people, right? There's some level of aggression that might present, or self-pity. They are really good at externalizing their behaviors. So they are always blaming someone else, never really taking ownership and moving their locus of control towards themselves. They can present as really charming, but they have extremely rigid values. And so this person on the inside, what they actually feel is tremendous amount of shame, guilt, fear, pain, and hurt within the family system. And this victim in the family allows the family dysfunction to continuously perpetuate, because it gives mom and dad, or mom and mom, dad and dad, grandma, grandpa, etc., that quote unquote role that the parents then embody as one of these quote unquote systems within their family system. So see how, like, if let's say, for example, you identify, you listen to this, and you are the scapegoat child, and then you have a sibling that is a victim. That victim and the scapegoat give mom and dad, or whoever the caregivers are, the ability to feel like the family hero within their parents' family system. And so that's where the systems of interconnectivity and generational patterning just continue to go on until you recognize that this is the role that I realize that I have, for one way, shape, or another, slid into, been assigned to within my family systems. And now I recognize that this role is, I'm actively acting it out. So do you have a core belief that you are inherently good enough? Do you have a core belief that you are worthy, even if you sound the alarm on the family's dysfunction, right? All of those things start to come into play. And if you're not actively trying to change your role or switch it up to a more empowering role, you're just going to reenact this cycle again and again. And then eventually, if you choose to have children, that will happen to their children. So it becomes a vicious cycle.
It ends up following you everywhere you go. I mean, these roles aren't just what you do, they're who you become. They're what you identify as, even if you don't have the language. Let's say you're the golden child, right? You always feel like everything is your responsibility. Everyone puts responsibility on you. It's like, is anyone ever going to love me? Am I going to have to keep performing over and over again? Now it's my boss. Now it's my partner. Now it's my own kids. Whatever the case may be, it ends up following you into every single dynamic you ever end up into. And that's why it is so important for you to actually identify what happened to you. Who were you? What were the messages that were told to you? What were the narratives you were told to adopt? How did that shape your behavior? How are you showing up in the world now? That way, to like what I said, you can then change it. You can heal from it. You can do something about it.
One of the things that is really empowering when people start to kind of recognize what their role is, to what you just said, Bianca, is like, what can you do about that? You know, and so I want to kind of present the light at the end of the tunnel, because, you know, a lot of clients that I have come to me have been primarily either the scapegoat or the golden children. And so they tend to have this core belief that is embedded within them that they're responsible for everyone's problems, and they're the ones that are going to heroically kind of lead their family through the challenges that they're going through. And while there's this empowered undertone to that, where it really presents itself is the concern, and where it doesn't become adaptive is at your expense. So at their expense, they're taking on way more responsibility for their family, for their systems, etc. And it's bogging them down from a biochemical standpoint. They're chronically stressed, chronically overwhelmed, taking on more than they can consider really is adaptive. And then there's this narrative that's like, but that's going to make me better, right? That's going to make everyone better. And so it's like, whether it's that is your forte or you're the enabler. And so you're shielding other people, even your partner, from their consequences, because that's the role that you played out. How do you go about changing that? What is that light at the end of the tunnel? The thing is, you start to be able to understand, okay, is this role something, first of all, you identify what role it is. And then secondly, you start to think about, okay, well, what would happen or what could happen? What if I were to actually differentiate myself from that role? Because that role is reenacted through patterns of thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that we cycle through again and again, instead of differentiating your sense of self and that sense of individuality outside of that role. And when you can start to do that, you start to recognize the unhealthy patterns that keep you in this connection to family system at your expense, one way or another, right? And so learning how to do that then translates to healthy coping mechanisms for your family and for your systems that then lead to a sense of sovereignty, a sense of individual agency. And what's really challenging is when you start to kind of move through change, your family system ain't gonna like it. Why? Because you've had a very structural, integral role to maintain this quote unquote family facade that is essentially this entrapment of the level of coping that your family has developed or not. And so I bring that neurochemistry research in from the beginning to now, because how we cope with challenges, our baseline understanding of how we do that, from the emotions that we attune to or avoid, to the thoughts that we choose to run or challenge, to the behaviors that we engage with or not or avoid, right? That is as a byproduct of the level of awareness and integration and full embodiment of our family system. So Bianca, think about you and I's family just for a second. How we've coped is because of what has been modeled in our family systems. And so by you and I going on the train that we have, that's brought into our awareness more adaptive coping mechanisms from the emotional attunement standpoint, to the thought challenging standpoint, to the behavioral reconstruction standpoint, and belief modification. And that has created a more adaptive change that has then trickled into our families, that whether or not they like it, it has helped to move the needle forward through our own sense of autonomy, agency, and sovereignty, which has opened up the door for our family members to walk through on their own path or not. And so whether it's us or whether it's anyone listening to this episode, the change does have pain connected to it. And that's why most people won't ever do some of this work. But the benefits that come after you reclaim your sense of identity, agency, you can choose how you respond to things, you have different coping patterns and mechanisms, you have that sense of agency, that benefit goes forever, because you literally feel that sense of liberation and you don't feel like tied down anymore or in these roles anymore. And you can discern between when that old pattern is getting reengaged versus when you can step outside of that.
And you're not doing this to change your family. I think going into this with the expectation that somehow your family is going to change or walk through the door because you did is it's the wrong approach. You're doing this for you. You're doing this so that you can heal from the burdens that you're carrying from your childhood and the lessons that you were forced to learn and the messages that you adopted that were never yours to own in the first place. If that results in changes in your family, that's wonderful. That's great. I sincerely wish that that's what happened. More often than not, though, that's not what ends up happening. What usually ends up happening is you go through this, your family gets pissed off, they start resenting you, and they start blaming you even more. Why are you doing this? You're making problems where there are none, blah, 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 blah. Why are you acting different? Why are you not showing up to things anymore? And they usually get frustrated, and then that's where people end up doing one of two things. They either cave and go back to the previous role because it benefits everybody else, or they maintain it, and then they have to make a decision about the kinds of interactions that they want to have with their family. And in group coaching session 8 of 9, Amelia showed this digital asset of digital boundaries. How much communication are you open to having, and what is your digital boundaries with your family or with anyone? Are they behind a brick wall so no one from them gets to contact you for a period of time? Or is it a complete open door, they have access to you whenever they want, or anything in the in between? You get to decide that. You, because you now are an adult with an adult brain, get to determine that. But you're not going to get to that point unless you identify what happened and then make the necessary changes and take accountability and autonomy for your growth. It doesn't mean 100% just throw blame, and it doesn't mean 100% take all responsibility that it was all your fault. It's finding that middle ground of blame appropriately and then take the appropriate amount of responsibility to fix your life, because nobody's going to do it for you.
100%. So to that end, I think it would be an injustice not to say this. You ever hear that terminology, that growth isn't linear, and kind of roll your eyes at that? I want everyone to kind of imagine, and a client had said that this changed her life forever. So I'm going to bring this in and kind of overlap three things as we turn to close this episode. We all know that change isn't linear, but how does change actually work? And if you're someone listening to this episode and you're recognizing, shit, this is my role that I'm like reenacting, how do I start to change that? First of all, change has 4 different stages, and the process of change model was initially designed out of this family therapy work. So most of us don't even know that. But the first one is the late stage status quo, which is essentially everything's fine. Everything is just, predictable, normal, quote unquote. But what is normal is not necessarily normal. What's normal for you isn't necessarily adaptive. What has been normal and status quo within your family doesn't necessarily serve you. And that's okay to name. I think that's de-shaming that is really important. I want you to think about your growth instead of linear. How should we think about it, Amelia? I want you to think about it like a tree and a tree's rings, because at the end of the day, that is what our growth journey really does look like. And what happens, and if you're on YouTube, I'm showing, tracing in what looks like a spiral, essentially. What happens when you hit a barrier? Just like a tree, right? When it is growing and it has this barrier, let's say a sidewalk, it's not gonna just stop growing. Just like you, as you go through this change, you're not just gonna stop trying to figure this out. You're gonna grow around the challenge or the roadblock or the thing that's getting in your way from getting to a better end. And then eventually you keep growing in that cycle. And that roadblock is that chaos, that stage that's chaotic. That's like, I don't know what the heck this is. I don't know what role I should have. But then you practice integration, and then it brings you to new status quo. So you essentially grow around that barrier, and eventually it becomes just a part of your story and who you've grown from. And I think that cycle, because growth is not linear, it's more circular. We forget that just like trees, we have moments where we feel like we can't get out of change and we don't feel like there's any light at the end of the tunnel, but you are growing. And so if you're listening to this, you're growing, you're evolving, you're practicing the integration, you're headed towards a new status quo, even just by listening to the end of this episode, because now you're more aware of what role and what pattern has been essentially spiraling you, and not outgrowing that pattern because you're not stepping outside into that sense of autonomy, sovereignty, and individuality, and then bringing that quote unquote family system role into who you have been, but not defining who you are. And so there's last thing I'll say here. If you've ever heard Bianca and I refer to the growth journey, I'm also going to have the team include this digital asset. You have Lonely Land, you have Old World, you have Lonely Land, and then you have New World. That is every single person's trek who's trying to evolve and trying to outgrow their role within their family system. And so for you, I encourage you to take a peek at that digital asset. Ask yourself, when you identify this role, are you living in Old World, which is that status quo? Are you headed towards a Lonely Land where you're feeling like you can't find your people? This is where so many things in the Evolve ecosystem can really help you start to redefine yourself and be celebrated for your authentic self. And as you discover that, and then are you trucking into new world, which is that version of you that you've always wanted to be, which has you stepping outside of these patterns? And so the only thing I think after you listen to this episode truly worth doing is defining what role had you had assigned to you, how that's impacted the patterning within your thoughts, emotions, and behavior. And then third, where do you want to step next? What type of role do you instead, the empowering alternative that you want to evolve into? If you can answer those 3 questions and get around someone that can help you do that, trust me, it is so incredibly liberating.
Well said.
Do you feel
Episode
complete?
suggestion? I do.
Nice.
This was really great.
Okay. So my episode suggestion, if this one resonated with you, is 423. You're not responsible for their emotions. A big leap for many, many of us. Yours?
438, understand. Oh, shit. 438, understanding trauma responses you mistake for personality. If this is something that you want help navigating through, if you want to get out of the roles and the identity that you had thrown onto you, please send us a DM. Amelia is the best in the world at helping people navigate this, at helping people to become, their most empowered selves, their most happy, capable, fulfilled selves, and helping people really navigate family relationships, couple relationships, business relationships, whatever the case may be. So if you want a coach who has walked the walk and talked the talk and is incredibly well versed in all of these things, please send us a DM, reach out to Amelia. She's your gal.
Thanks, B.
All right, everybody.
Okay.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. We know this was heavy. Maybe go do the episode. Go listen to the episode we recorded before this, 458. We did a couple of meditations in there that might really help you. So head over to that one, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.